Tonight, or rather for the next few hours, you'll be living the life of a pirate. Not the glamorous kind with eyeliner, dramatic sword fights, and a perfectly fluffed parrot perched on your shoulder. Number, this is the actual day-to-day business of piracy, and it is less dramatic. In fact, it is mostly damp. You will smell faintly of old wood, pickled fish, and your own unwashed socks. But don't worry, so does everyone else on board. That is a comfort, if not exactly a fragrant one. You may imagine, as you step aboard your fine pirate vessel, that someone will direct you toward your quarters. Perhaps a cabin, perhaps with a little writing desk, and a bed of sorts, maybe even a shelf to keep your most precious belongings. Unfortunately, you will quickly discover that your quarters is a hammock. Suspended between two beams in the dark, low-breathing belly of the ship. It rocks gently as the ship sways, gently at first, then violently, then gently again. In time, you will learn to lie in it diagonally, which prevents the hammock from folding you in half like a poorly stuffed dumpling. But on your first night, you lie stiff as a plank, unsure if the rope will hold, listening to every creak as though the entire ship were plotting to drop you on the floor. It is a humble beginning, and by humble, I mean damp. There is no escaping dampness. Your hammock is damp. Your clothes are damp. The wooden beams above you drip with condensation, which falls with the unnerving regularity of a clock, but with less accuracy. It does not matter whether the ship has sailed through storms or calm waters, whether the air is cold or humid. Dampness is the single most reliable feature of your life. The ship breathes, it seems, exhaling moisture into your hammock as if to remind you you are not welcome here, and yet here you are. Rats enjoy it. They scurry about overhead, occasionally daring to leap onto the hammock ropes. If you are very lucky, one will miss and fall directly onto your chest in the middle of the night. You will scream. The rat will scream. And yet, somehow, this will not be the most disturbing event of your week. As you settle into your hammock, you may glance around and realize that everyone else is doing precisely the same thing. Not in neat rows, mind you. This is not a military ship. Hammocks sway in uneven clusters, occasionally bumping into one another with an intimacy that you would prefer to avoid. Privacy, you will quickly discover, is something that lives exclusively in your memory. You once had it, you do not anymore. If you need a quiet moment, you will not find it here. Every cough, every snore, every muttered word in someone's sleep comes to you uninvited. A man 2 hammocks over seems to snore in 3 distinct tones, like an experimental organist. Another talks to himself throughout the night, possibly negotiating with imaginary merchants. You, however, remain awake, wondering whether joining a monastery might have been a more peaceful choice. It is impossible to describe the smell of the sleeping quarters without first listing its ingredients. There is salt from the sea, tar from the ropes, sweat, which multiplies daily, the faint tang of mold which clings to the timbers like an unpaid tenant, and, of course, the unwashed bodies of 20 to 30 men who live, work, and eat together without the faintest notion of deodorant. The result is not merely unpleasant, it is a presence. The smell sits with you. It joins you in your hammock. It becomes part of your dreams. At some point, you stop noticing it, not because it has lessened, but because your brain has given up. You have brought a few possessions, carefully chosen, perhaps a knife, a small pouch of coins, maybe a keepsake from home. You thought these items would fit nicely on a shelf or in a chest. Instead, they fit nicely in a small canvas bag that you keep tied to the post beside your hammock, lest someone decide that your knife is now their knife. Sharing is not encouraged, except when it comes to misery. Your possessions are yours, but they are also at risk. If you ever misplace something, you must assume that the sea has claimed it. That, or the fellow in the next hammock, who seems unusually well supplied for someone who never steals. The ship itself is never silent. The timbers creak like old men with sore knees. The waves slap against the hull with the persistence of someone knocking at your door while you pretend not to be home. Above you, the sails groan, and occasionally a rope loosens and snaps taut again with a noise like a gunshot. Add to this the chorus of human sounds, snoring, coughing, shifting, whispering. Someone mutters prayers into the dark. Someone else farts, loudly, unapologetically. You do not know his name, but you will know him forever by this contribution. And then there are the rats, of course. Their claws make faint scratching noises in the timbers. Sometimes they squeak in arguments, which they resolve faster than the humans do. It is, in its way, a community. In your first week, you will barely sleep. In your second week, you will sleep, but fitfully. By the third week, you will sleep soundly because exhaustion leaves you no alternative. You learn tricks, stuffing spare cloth into your ears, wrapping yourself in your cloak to avoid contact with the wet rope, arranging your hammock diagonally to cradle you more comfortably. None of this makes it pleasant, of course. It merely makes it survivable, and survival, you will discover, is the true definition of comfort at sea. Your dreams take on strange qualities in this environment. You may dream of land, of walking on steady ground, only to awaken with a start as the hammock sways violently in a sudden gust. You may dream of food, not the salted meat and hardtack you know, but fresh bread, warm cheese, apples. These are cruel dreams. You wake hungrier than before. Sometimes you dream of silence, the absence of creaking wood and snoring men, the absence of dampness. It is a dream of emptiness, of nothingness. And when you wake, you feel briefly disoriented because nothingness on this ship does not exist. It is worth noting that no one in history has written poetry about pirate hammocks. No one has waxed lyrical about the beauty of mildew or the romance of rats. The pirate's bed is not celebrated, and for good reason. You will never look back on these nights fondly, but you will remember them vividly, because when one is suspended in damp rope, listening to 30 strangers snore in unison, the memory becomes etched with the clarity of suffering. If you ever leave this life behind, you will appreciate, in ways you never imagined, the simple pleasure of a dry bed. A bed that does not creak with the rhythm of the sea. A bed without the risk of rat visitation. Luxury, you will realize, is not gold or jewels. It is the absence of damp. And so each night, you crawl into your hammock, rearrange yourself into some approximation of comfort, and surrender to the inevitable. A few hours of restless sleep, broken by creaks, snores, and the occasional rat. It is not glamorous. It is not heroic, but it is, in the simplest sense, your pirate's life. And tomorrow, you will wake up, sore, unwashed, mildly annoyed, and do it all again. You awaken in your hammock, groggy and sore, as the ship creaks with the rhythm of the sea. Your first thought is not of treasure, nor of glory, nor even of rum. Your first thought is, what will I eat today? Unfortunately, the answer is usually regret, with a side of salt. Breakfast, if it can be called that, consists of a biscuit, not a soft, flaky biscuit, not the kind you would smother in butter and honey on land. Number. This is hardtack. A square of flour, water, and salt baked until it has achieved geological density. It is not bread. It is an edible rock. The chief property of hardtack is that it never goes bad, which is another way of saying that it never truly lived in the first place. The biscuits are often months old. They chip teeth, they bruise gums. They require soaking in water, beer, or rum just to be marginally chewable. Even then, they resist digestion, lodging in your stomach like resentful tenants. Occasionally, you discover a weevil in your hardtack. This does not horrify you. On the contrary, you view it as an upgrade. Protein at no extra cost. You become adept at tapping the biscuit before eating it. If something moves, you accept your bonus protein. If nothing moves, you resign yourself to dry disappointment. After breakfast, you may receive meat. Not fresh meat, of course. Freshness at sea lasts about as long as a polite conversation in a tavern. No, your meat has been salted, and salted, and salted again. It arrives in barrels. You pry off the lid and are greeted with the smell of concentrated brine and despair. The meat itself is gray, fibrous, and has the texture of boiled rope. It is technically beef, though at this stage it could be almost anything. The salt has done its work so thoroughly that flavor no longer resides here. It is simply salty chewiness, the category of food most familiar to you. On particularly unlucky days, the barrel may have gone bad despite the salt. The meat glistens with a slimy sheen or crawls with maggots. This is not, as one might hope, a reason to throw it away. Number. The maggots are simply boiled along with the meat. They, too, are protein. You eat because hunger trumps disgust, and you are always hungry. If the ship is well provisioned, you might find dried peas or beans among your meals. These are boiled into a stew that resembles a soup, but has less dignity. It is thick, lumpy, and bland, but it is filling. And filling, in the world of piracy, is the closest thing you will ever have to joy at the dinner table. Sometimes onions are included, though they spoil quickly. Sometimes carrots. These are rare delights, and the men will fight over them with the passion of poets. An onion becomes a prize worth guarding, a carrot a treasure greater than gold. You may also have cheese, though it is less cheese in the sense of a delicacy and more cheese in the sense of an experiment in mold. It arrives in a lump wrapped in cloth, already suspiciously green around the edges. You cut away the mold and eat what remains. If the mold persists throughout, you sigh and eat it anyway. It tastes strong, sour, and faintly alive. Butter is rarer still. It exists for a brief moment, at the start of the voyage, before it succumbs to rancidity. When it does, you continue to eat it because you must, but you spread it on hardtack with the grim determination of someone applying medicine rather than enjoying a meal. Water is stored in barrels. At first, it is drinkable. Then it begins to taste of wood, then of slime. By the end of the barrel, it tastes faintly of rot. You drink it anyway, because your choices are limited. But you often mix it with alcohol to disguise the flavor. And so, rum, the most dependable feature of pirate life. Issued daily, rum is less of a luxury and more of a necessity. It sterilizes the water, lifts the mood, and dulls the misery of hardtack. Of course, it also makes men loud, argumentative, and reckless. But in moderation, it is your comfort. It is your morning tea, your evening cordial, and your midnight lullaby. Without rum, piracy would be unbearable. With rum, it is only mostly unbearable. Fresh fruit and vegetables are rare. They spoil quickly and are therefore consumed within days of leaving port. After that, weeks or months may pass without a single bite of anything fresh. Your gums begin to swell. Your teeth loosen. Your skin bruises easily. This is scurvy, the constant shadow haunting you and your shipmates. If, by miracle, a lemon or lime appears, it is greeted like divine intervention. Men fight over wedges as though they were relics. A single citrus fruit can be bartered for nearly anything, but most of the time, there is no citrus. And so your teeth rattle in your mouth, preparing for their inevitable departure. Meals are not leisurely affairs. They are loud, messy, communal. You eat on deck or below if the weather is foul. Plates are scarce, spoons are shared, knives double as both tools and cutlery. There is no politeness, no passing of dishes. You reach, you grab, you chew. You eat quickly before someone else decides your portion is now theirs. Men argue during meals. They laugh, they sing, they spill. Food falls to the floor where rats eagerly join the feast. It is chaotic, but it is life. Once in a while, fortune smiles. Perhaps a fishing line brings in a fresh catch. A bird, unlucky enough to land on the rigging, becomes dinner. Turtles, when found on tropical islands, provide meat and eggs. These meals are rare and memorable. You taste freshness for the first time in months. The flavor is vivid, astonishing, overwhelming. You eat with joy, almost forgetting the dampness, the smell, the misery. But such moments are fleeting. The next day you return to hardtack. On land, after a raid, meals are transformed. You may dine on roasted meats, fresh bread, exotic fruits, stolen wine. For a brief evening, you live like a king. But it never lasts. Supplies spoil, are consumed, or are lost in drunken revelry. The sea reclaims you, and with it the salted meat, the dry biscuits, the moldy cheese. You remember the banquet fondly, like a dream. And you wait hungrily for the next. It is remarkable, truly, how little romance there is in pirate food. The stories speak of treasure, of daring raids, of freedom on the high seas. They do not mention the biscuits that break teeth, or the barrels that smell of rot, or the onions fought over like coins. But this is the truth of it. The pirate's diet is not glorious. It is not adventurous. It is survival in its blandest form. If there is poetry to be found here, it is in the sheer determination of the human stomach. To endure salted meat, weevilled biscuits, and rancid butter day after day, and still call it dinner. This is resilience, if not culinary excellence. And so each day you sit with your shipmates and eat the same grim meal. Hardtack, salted meat, perhaps a ladle of bean stew, a sip of rum to wash it down. You chew, you swallow, you sigh. You do not live to eat, you eat to live. And in time, you forget what true food tastes like. You dream of apples, of bread, of butter that is not green. You wake to the reality of brine. This is your pirate's feast, not golden, not glorious, but enough, just enough to keep you alive for another day at sea. You wake from your hammock, stiff from sleep, your mouth still tasting faintly of salted despair. The day stretches before you. Perhaps you imagine wrongly that being a pirate means freedom, that you rise with the sun, stretch leisurely, and set about your business of adventure. But no, your daily life is work, and not glamorous work, not sword fights or treasure maps or cunning disguises. It is rope and wood and more rope. Your first task, almost without fail, is scrubbing the deck. Why? Because the sea is unforgiving, and wood is a terrible material for a floor. Salt crusts on the boards, algae forms in corners. Tar drips, fish guts spill, men vomit, and rats, those permanent companions, leave behind their own unwelcome evidence. So you scrub. On your knees, with a bucket of seawater and a stiff brush. The bristles cut at your hands. The salt stings at your knuckles. The boards resist because boards are stubborn things. You scrub and scrub, and when you finish, the deck looks slightly less filthy. Tomorrow, you will do it again. And the next day, and the next. Until you begin to suspect that piracy is less about stealing treasure and more about being a janitor with better scenery. When the wind is with you, the sails must be set. When the wind is against you, the sails must be trimmed. When there is no wind at all, the sails hang like sulking children, and you still must fuss over them, because idle hands are not permitted. The sails are heavy, the ropes rough, the rigging high. You climb like a monkey up the mast, clutching rope with hands that are already blistered, clinging to wood that splinters generously into your palms. The view is spectacular. The sea spreads endlessly, blue and vast. The sky arches above, wide and magnificent. For one brief moment, you feel the romance of it. And then the wind shifts, the rope burns your hands, and you nearly fall to your death. The romance passes quickly. A ship is not so much a structure as it is an ongoing argument with water. Water insists on entering. You insist on keeping it out. Neither side ever wins. Every day, somewhere in the lower deck, a trickle appears. You stuff it with tar, with cloth, with whatever is handy. It holds for now. Tomorrow, there will be another leak. You begin to understand that sailing is simply the art of not sinking, practiced repeatedly until you die of something else first. Ah, yes. The cannons. Those great iron beasts lined up along the deck, promising danger, battle, glory. In truth, they are mostly quiet. You clean them, oil them, polish them. You move their wheels so they don't seize. They sit there looming, waiting for a moment that rarely comes. When they do fire, the noise is deafening. Your ears ring for hours. The smoke chokes your lungs. Your shoulder aches from recoil. It is thrilling, yes, but brief. Most of the time, cannons are simply large pets that need constant feeding and care, yet never seem particularly grateful. Rope is your constant companion. You coil rope, you uncoil rope. You drag it here, you drag it there. You knot it, unknot it, and then knot it again. If a pirate ship were a religion, rope would be its scripture. It holds the sails, the masts, the rigging, the anchors, the very hammock where you attempt to sleep. And so you touch rope more than you touch anything else in your life, more than food, more than coins, more than people. Your hands become permanently marked, blistered, calloused, lined with rope burns. They are the badges of your trade. Though they are less impressive than scars from duels, they are far more common. Beyond the rope and sails, there is constant repair. The ship groans like an old man, always threatening to fall apart. You patch sails with needle and thread, sewing clumsily but urgently. You hammer planks, you tar seams, you replace nails. A pirate ship is less a vessel of adventure and more a perpetual construction site, floating stubbornly despite its flaws. Your tools are few, your materials limited, your skill questionable. Yet somehow, through improvisation and sheer stubbornness, the ship continues. When work is slower, you clean weapons. Your cutlass, your pistol, if you're lucky enough to own one. Rust threatens them constantly. As the sea air eats away at the metal, you sharpen blades on whetstones, rub them with oil. You test the edge, careful not to cut yourself, though everyone does eventually. And yet most days, the blade stays sheathed. Most days, the pistol is not fired. You clean and maintain them endlessly, preparing for a battle that may never come. There are watches to be stood, of course. You take turns staring at the horizon, squinting into the distance, searching for ships, for storms, for anything unusual. It is monotonous. Hours pass with nothing but the sea stretching endlessly. You invent shapes in the waves, stories in the clouds, Sometimes you speak aloud just to hear your own voice, and then, suddenly, a shout, "Sail ho!" Your heart leaps. Excitement, perhaps treasure, perhaps battle. But more often, it is simply another merchant ship, too far, too fast, or too uninteresting to pursue. And so you return to staring, and the horizon mocks you with its emptiness. Sometimes your work is stranger. Perhaps you must clean the bilge, the foul, stinking water that collects at the very bottom of the ship, full of rot, slime, and worse. It is the single most unpleasant task aboard, and yet it must be done. Other times you must assist in careening, dragging the ship ashore, tipping it onto its side, scraping barnacles and sea growth from its hull. It is exhausting, filthy work, and it cuts your hands and feet until they sting for days. You begin to realize that piracy, far from being glamorous, is mostly heavy labor performed in terrible conditions, with occasional bursts of violence to break up the monotony. Work is not optional. The captain and quartermaster ensure that all hands contribute. Idleness is punished, sometimes with reduced rations, sometimes with lashes, sometimes simply with mockery. The pirate code may sound grand, but in practice it is simply a way of ensuring that no one shirks their endless chores. And so you work, not because you are passionate about rope, but because failing to haul your share of it will earn you more pain than hauling it in the first place. By evening, your body aches. Your shoulders burn from hauling. Your hands sting from rope burns. Your knees are raw from scrubbing. You collapse into your hammock, exhausted, every muscle sore. And yet you know that tomorrow you will do it all again. Because the sea never rests, and neither can you. It is astonishing, really, how little of piracy involves the act of piracy. Most days are spent in the company of soap, rope, and tar. You are less a swashbuckler and more a floating handyman, constantly patching, scrubbing, and hauling. The adventure, when it comes, is brief. The work is endless, and you begin to suspect that the true treasure of piracy would be a day without chores. And so your daily routine continues. Scrub, haul, patch, polish. Work until your hands blister, then work some more. It is not romantic, it is not exciting, it is not even particularly interesting. But it is what keeps the ship afloat, keeps the sails aloft, keeps you alive. This is the pirate's labor, less adventure, more maintenance. And you, unwilling apprentice, are now a master of rope, wood, and tedium. Sleep comes as relief, not luxury. Tomorrow it begins again. If you thought the sea itself was your greatest trial, you were mistaken. It is not the storms, nor the damp, nor the rope burns that wear you down. It is the people. Your fellow pirates are your crewmates, your companions, your reluctant family. They are loud, they are smelly, they are occasionally violent, and they are always present. There is no leaving them, no walking away, no finding solitude. You live together, work together, eat together, sleep together, and more often than you'd like, smell one another. It is a fraternity born not of choice, but of necessity. And like most families, it is equal parts comforting and unbearable. The first thing you notice about your companions is how different they all are. They come from everywhere. England, France, Spain, Africa, the Caribbean islands. Some were once sailors, some soldiers, some slaves, some simple farmers who made a very poor career change. Together, they form a strange democracy of the desperate. No one here is particularly noble. No one here is particularly respectable. But each one has chosen piracy because the alternatives were worse. It is, in a way, reassuring. No one aboard this ship has illusions about honor or virtue. Everyone is simply trying to survive, and if possible, to profit. Your companions smell. This is not said with malice. It is simply fact. They smell of sweat, of salt, of old leather and damp wood. Their breath smells of rum, their clothes of mildew. When they remove their boots, which is rare, thank goodness, the air takes on a new, more aggressive note. You smell exactly the same, of course, which is why no one complains. There is a certain comfort in shared odor, like belonging to a club that requires only that you stop bathing regularly. Living in such close quarters breeds conflict. A man steals another man's portion of food. A card game ends in accusations of cheating. An insult is thrown, overheard, exaggerated. Disputes are settled in various ways, sometimes with a fistfight on deck, cheered on by the others. Sometimes with dice or cards, letting chance decide justice. Sometimes with silence, the long, simmering kind, where two men glare at one another for weeks until someone finally forgets why they were angry. Duels do occur, though rarely. More often, the quartermaster intervenes, handing down small punishments to keep tempers from boiling over. The crew cannot afford to lose men to petty squabbles, after all. There are too few hands already. When work is done, your companions entertain themselves in predictable ways. Gambling is constant. Dice roll across barrels, cards slap against crates, coins, or more often, worthless trinkets, change hands rapidly. Arguments break out, accusations fly. It is all part of the game. Singing, too, is frequent. Sea shanties rise into the night air, ragged but enthusiastic. Some men have good voices, most do not. But together, in drunken harmony, they sound almost bearable. Stories are told endlessly, of raids gone wrong, of women loved and lost, of treasures hidden on distant shores. You learn to take them all with a pinch of salt, for every man aboard is a liar in his own way. But the stories pass the time, and in the end, that is what matters. Among pirates, names are often replaced with nicknames. Perhaps you are called Red for the color of your hair, or One Eye for obvious reasons, or Goat for reasons you do not wish to discuss. Nicknames stick, regardless of your feelings about them. They follow you everywhere, and eventually you stop protesting. Better to be Goat than to have no name at all. You discover that your companions are eccentric in their habits. One man sharpens his knife compulsively, even in conversation. Another refuses to eat peas, claiming they are unlucky. Another keeps a chicken as a pet, though no one can say why. These peculiarities become normal, part of the ship's character. In time, you form friendships. Not the gentle, refined friendships of land, sealed with gifts and letters, but rough, practical bonds forged in hardship. You share food when rations run low. You patch each other's clothes. You laugh together at the absurdities of shipboard life, at the misfortunes that would otherwise crush you. You may even come to trust one another with your lives, for you must. In battle, in storm, in sickness, you depend utterly on the men around you, and they, in turn, depend on you. Of course, not all relationships are friendly. Some men dislike you. Some resent you. Some simply rub you the wrong way, their habits intolerable, their voices grating. You avoid them when you can. When you cannot, you endure. There is no escape. Your hammock is not far enough away to silence their snores. Your duties inevitably force you together. Over time, you learn patience. Or at least, the art of ignoring. It is a survival skill as essential as knot tying. When the ship makes port, the crew explodes into chaos. Your companions scatter into taverns, into brothels, into gambling dens. They drink, they fight, they spend their shares of loot with reckless abandon. You follow, because what else is there to do? And together you experience the strange joy of being poor and drunk in foreign lands. Fights break out inevitably, but you return to the ship bruised, poorer, yet strangely closer. Shared hangovers have a way of binding men together, Living with these men, you begin to realize something profound. None of you truly like each other, not all the time. But you endure, because you must. The sea is vast and merciless. Alone you would perish. Together you survive. It is an unspoken contract, a bond stronger than affection, companionship by necessity, loyalty by circumstance, not glamorous, not romantic, but real. It is curious, is it not, that the greatest treasure of piracy is not gold, nor jewels, nor plunder. It is companionship, not the sweet kind, not the poetic kind, but the rough, irritating, enduring companionship of men who cannot escape one another. You may dream of treasure, but you will remember the laughter, the songs, the arguments, the stink. You will remember the company you kept, because like it or not, they became your world. And so, day after day, you live with these men. You work beside them, eat beside them, sleep beside them. You laugh, you argue, you gamble, you sing. You love them, you hate them, you cannot do without them. They are your family now. A loud, unruly, smelly family, bound not by blood, but by necessity. And in their company you find the strangest kind of comfort. Because no matter how damp, how hungry, how weary you become, you are not alone. It is a curious fact about pirates that despite their reputation as scourges of the sea, they spend a great deal of their lives desperately longing for land. Not because land is particularly kind to them, quite the opposite actually, but because land, unlike the endless ocean, contains things such as chairs, and food not boiled in salted water, and roofs that do not drip on your face while you sleep, and people who are not the same 12 loud, unpleasant men you have spent the last 3 months with. Land is, in a word, relief. A temporary reprieve from the ceaseless, heaving, rolling monotony of the sea. It does not last long. It is never quite what you imagined, but it is enough. You always know when land is near. The men become restless, like children promised sweets. They pace the deck. They speculate about taverns, about women, about gambling tables, about how much rum they might reasonably consume before unconsciousness. The air smells different, fresher, with a hint of greenery, or smoke, depending on the port. Seabirds wheel overhead. The horizon shows that faint, dark line that is not water, though you stare at it as if it might be a mirage. Anticipation builds. You dream of soft beds and warm meals. You imagine peace. You are, of course, deluded. The first steps on land are always strange. Your legs, so accustomed to the rolling deck, wobble awkwardly. The ground feels untrustworthy in its stillness. You sway, drunkenly, though you have not yet touched a drop. Your nose is overwhelmed. The smell of soil, of flowers, of cooking fires, it is intoxicating. Even the stink of a busy port town seems like perfume after months of mildew and bilge. You would weep with gratitude if you were not too busy tripping over your own feet. Where do pirates go when they reach land? To church, perhaps, to confess, to the market, to buy wholesome food and clean clothing, to a bathhouse for long overdue hygiene. They go to taverns. Always without fail, the tavern is the first and often the only destination. There they drink rum until the floor tilts more than the ship ever did. There they sing badly until their voices crack. There they gamble away whatever meager share of plunder they possess. And more often than not, there they fight. You may attempt moderation, you may even succeed briefly, but it is difficult to remain virtuous when surrounded by men competing to see who can be unconscious first. Where do pirates go when they reach land? To church, perhaps, to confess. To the market, to buy wholesome food and clean clothing? To a bathhouse for long overdue hygiene? Number, they go to taverns. Always, without fail, the tavern is the first and often the only destination. There they drink rum until the floor tilts more than the ship ever did. There they sing badly until their voices crack. There they gamble away whatever meager share of plunder they possess, and more often than not, there they fight. You may attempt moderation. You may even succeed, briefly. But it is difficult to remain virtuous when surrounded by men competing to see who can be unconscious first. But land is not all joy. For pirates, land is dangerous. The law lives on land. Navies, soldiers, sheriffs, they all wait in ports, eager to hang men such as you. You must be cautious. Your ship's flag may be tucked away, but your clothes, your manner, your smell all betray you. Authorities have learned to recognize pirates, even when disguised, especially when disguised. And so you tread carefully. You do not stray far from the tavern. You do not speak too loudly of your profession. You avoid the gaze of men with uniforms, or worse, with clipboards. Land is freedom, yes, but it is also a trap. Despite the risks, shore leave develops its own rituals. Some men always find dice games as if drawn to them by fate. Some seek women, temporary companionship to soften their loneliness. Others simply drink until the world dissolves, which is a form of meditation in its way. You might spend your time more quietly. You might walk along the shoreline, marveling at trees, at flowers, at the simple beauty of grass beneath your feet. You might sit alone, savoring the sound of something other than creaking wood and crashing waves. But sooner or later the tavern will pull you in. It always does. The townsfolk view you with suspicion. They know what you are. They hear it in your accent, see it in your scars, smell it in your unwashed clothes. Some are afraid of you. Some despise you. A few, strangely, admire you. Children stare. Merchants scowl. Innkeepers smile because your money spends the same as anyone else's. It is a brief and awkward mingling of worlds that do not fit together. You are a visitor from chaos, wandering through their orderly lives, and they will be glad when you leave. It is almost inevitable that trouble will arise. A gambling game goes sour. A drunken insult is misunderstood. Someone stumbles into someone else's chair, and honor must apparently be defended. Tables overturn, mugs shatter. The fight spills into the street, a writhing mass of fists and curses. And you, whether you wished it or not, are part of it. The town guard may arrive, truncheons in hand. You scatter. Some men are caught, spending the night in a cell. Others limp back to the ship with black eyes and split lips. It is, in its way, a tradition. And then, all too soon, it is over. The captain calls the crew back. The ship must sail. There is no time to linger, no money left to spend, no patience for the law to catch up. You stagger back aboard, head pounding, stomach queasy, purse empty. You lie in your hammock regretting every decision you made ashore, and yet you smile. Because for a brief moment, you were free. Land is not paradise. It is loud, it is dirty, it is dangerous. It tempts you with pleasures you cannot afford and threatens you with justice you cannot escape, and yet you crave it. Because compared to the endless sea, land is variety. It is unpredictability. It is, most importantly, different. Without land, you would go mad. With land, you come close. But the madness is at least entertaining. So you see, life as a pirate is not merely a matter of storms and swords and treasure. It is also the peculiar joy of stepping ashore, wobbling like a fool, and eating a piece of fruit as if it were the finest jewel in the world. It is the chaos of taverns, the danger of port guards, the laughter of drunken companions, the regret of hangovers. It is fleeting freedom, always cut short, always imperfect, always just enough to keep you dreaming of the next time. And then, of course, you climb back aboard the ship. Back to the sea. Back to the creak of wood, the stink of sweat, the endless horizon. Until the next landfall, rare but always longed for.